Okay, welcome everyone. Our panelists, Howard, Wade, Grant, and Sarah Ling. And thank you so much for being here. All of you. Right now we have 32 people and they keep coming. So thank you everyone for promoting this event. And first, I would like to make a land acknowledgement, just so everybody know that we are actually on the indigenous land. We gratefully acknowledge that we live and work on unceded ancestral territory of the Coast Salish people. And then we give thanks to the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, I can never get that right, nations in Vancouver. And to you, the viewers, wherever you are, take a minute and to recognize the land that you are living and working. And if you don't know, you can go online and find out. There's lots of information online. Kamiko.
So I just wanted to let you know that the BIPOC group, which is putting on this film night, these film nights, and Asian Heritage Month, are part of the Vancouver Unitarians. And Unitarians, our beliefs are diverse and inclusive. We have no shared creed. Our shared covenant supports the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We are called to action around racial justice within our congregation, within ourselves, and in collaboration with our community.
I want to make acknowledgement. I did invite some of the elected officials, the MLAs, the MPs, to participate as a participants, to listen and then to listen to this very important part of our society. And so they will pay attention, and when they make decisions and make policy changes. I also want to acknowledge media here, Fairchild Television, Ida Look, whom I've known a long time ago, that are here. She's here to make recording and also to understand the issue, because next month she's doing a special for next month, which is the Indigenous month. Just so everybody is aware, as we have new people coming in. If you don't want to be recorded, this program is being recorded. And if you don't want to, you can turn off your camera. Yes.
That's what I was going to say. That was my part. But welcome everybody. And tonight we'll be talking with our guests about the 1-hour feature film, All Our Father's Relations, and the 2 short films with Larry Grant, that's Howard's brother, Intertwining Cultures and Not Belonging. So because we have a fairly large group, more than are on the screen, it probably won't work that you put up your hand. But so what I would recommend is that you write your question down in the chat, and we'll have, let's see, is Lynn around? Oh, Lynn is going to be helping to take care of the Q&A section. And so what we'll do is we have Mina and I and Anne and other people from the BIPOC group have a few questions to start with. And then hopefully we'll keep that part short so that we can open it up to all of you if you have questions. I hope you've all seen the films. They are amazing. I learned a lot. And yeah, so let's go.
We're supposed to wrap up at 8, but if there's a lot of questions, so we are willing to go beyond that. So please do write down your questions, and we're more than happy to work with you. I'm not too sure about our panelists. How is your time this evening? Are you okay to stay on beyond 8 o'clock?
I am, yes, yes.
Thank you, Howard. Sarah?
I'm okay as well.
Okay, Wade?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much again.
You want to introduce Howard and Wade?
I think you're going to introduce next week's program a little
Oh,
bit as
I was
well.
going to do that at the end, but okay. Right now, next Friday, we'll be talking about the CBC documentary Rutsu, which is the Japanese version of an English word roots, about the grandson of David Suzuki, his Tamo Campos, he's my son, as he traveled to Japan to learn about his roots. And many of you at UCV have seen his movies, which they combine snowboarding and activism and environmental concerns. He is currently working up north with the Taltan, but he's going to join us on Zoom next Friday. And as his mom, I'll have the privilege of hosting the evening. Take it away, Mina.
Okay, I'm going to introduce Howard and Wade Grant, and I got their bio here. So it's a very extensive bio. We already it's condensed already. So I'm just floored that they're here. Howard Grant was born and raised in the Musqueam territory in the community. He was one of the fortunate children who did not attend the residential school, giving him the benefit of learning his culture, values, and the teachings from his mother and elders. Mr. Grant is his family's culture speaker, a historian, and a culture leader. Mr. Grant is a long-serving member of the Musqueam Council and is currently the executive director of the First Nations Summit, which is comprised of a majority of First Nations and tribal councils in BC. The First Nations Summit provides a forum to address issues related to Aboriginal title, rights, and treaty negotiations, as well as other issues of common concern. Mr. Grant was previously employed as the executive director of the Musqueam Indian Band from 1992 to 1997, and held senior management positions with the Department of Indian and Northern Affairs, Canada, now AANDC, from 1984 to 1992. As we learn in the film, his father, Hong Tim Heng, left southern China, Simon, it should be Simon in Cantonese, the village near Zhongshan in China's southern Guangdong province in 1920 for Vancouver, and paid a steep head tax to gain entry. I believe he paid $500. He labored at a vegetable market garden called Ling on Yun on Musqueam land with his father and uncles. Living in a bunkhouse, there were other Chinese workers. He met and married their mother, Agnes Grant, the daughter of Seymour Grant and the last fluent speaker of the
Hankaminam speaking people.
sorry, I don't know how to say that word. It's so many things are new to me too. I'm here to learn. Yes, in their community, and the Grant family historian. Agnes Grant and Hong Tim Heng had an arranged marriage, which was traditional in the Musqueam and Chinese culture at the time. They had 4 children, Gordon, Larry, Helen, and our guest this evening, Howard Grant. The film, All Our Father's Relations, documents the visit for the first time in 2013 by members of the Grant family from Vancouver to their father's ancestral village in Guangdong, China. Tamiko, you're going to introduce Wade?
Okay, Wade, it's a lot shorter because I didn't get the information. Son of Wendy Grant John and Howard Grant. Born and raised on Musqueam land, Wade spent 10 years as a Musqueam council member. In 2018 was a Vancouver City Council candidate and currently is Chief of Staff to Musqueam Band Chief and Council. Sarah Ling. Sarah was born and raised in Prince Rupert on Tsimshian territory. She holds a BA in English Lit with a minor in First Nations and Indigenous Studies and an MA in Interdisciplinary Studies from UBC with a community-centered research background in Chinese and Indigenous relations on Musqueam territory. Sarah is the co-editor of Journeys of Hope, Challenging Discrimination and Building on Vancouver's Chinatown Legacies, and lead producer of All Our Fathers Relations. Sarah is currently the exhibition and program manager for the Chinese Canadian Museum. She is an active volunteer in Vancouver Chinatown and serves as chair of the Chinese Canadian Historical Society of BC. Wow. And we have to add also Larry Grant's bio. Larry, Howard's brother, is an adjunct professor at UBC's First Nations and Endangered Languages program. The two short films were produced by Chinese Canadian Stories, a joint UBC SFU project led by UBC history prof. Henry Yu. Okay.
Great. Okay, now we're going to go to the questions. I'm going to be asking some questions, and then Tamiko, are you going to ask some too?
Sure.
Okay, you're going to ask the question 3, I suppose. Okay, this film shows a bit of history that everyone should know about. I was so impressed when I first saw it. It was something I never knew because I think within the Chinese community, there's this segregation or isolation, and then there's a bias towards First Nation communities as well. So this film really kind of connected with the Chinese community, and suddenly they were like, oh, they're one of us. So yeah, I'm learning through this film. We also learned about the Chinese labor building, and then they're also not just a building, but they're also dying from building it off the railroad. But that's beyond, like, that's not the only thing the Chinese pioneers, when they came, what they did. They did a lot of things. So like the father in this film, that he was a farmer of vegetable garden, and that fed the city. And also the early Chinese community, their relationship with the Musqueam community, based on some of the stories in the Chinese Canadian Story Project, a fascinating emerges that very likely the Grant siblings grew up with the Hunk Mitnam.
Yeah.
And the Cantonese as their first language, and they learn English later. How is your Cantonese? 你嘅廣東話點啊?
For me, unfortunately, my father passed away when I was a young boy, and that didn't give me the opportunity. I did go to preschool, kindergarten, I guess, if you want to call it. And I lasted one day because I didn't know anybody. And so that was it for me, one day of Chinese kindergarten. It wasn't Chinese school. And no discrimination, because my first day of public school with the Guailo, Lo Fan, I also left at recess. So I have no depth of appreciation of understanding of Cantonese. I know how to count in Chinese up to 100. I know a few words, and a lot of words that you wouldn't want to say in public, but yeah, no, not Sarah Ling said that to me. No, but my older brother, he married a Chinese lady, and he understands Chinese quite well, and he went to Chinese school as a young boy, you know. So I'm the reverse. I was the spoiled baby that I was forced to take up English and learn it well. So Larry took up Hunkaminam, and Gordy took up Cantonese, and I took up English.
That's a very, very interesting that the siblings. What about your sister?
My sister she didn't take up anything. That she helped my mother and helped look after me. She was, you know, I have always used the phrase and to tease my mother that I was the unwanted child because I was born much later than my three siblings, and I was the golden child, and so all of those kinds of things. So, but my sister had the responsibility of looking after me and helping my mother and her brothers as well. So, but she was my father's pet, I guess, if I could say it that way.
Growing up between two cultures, the Musqueam as well as the Chinese, I know that when you were little, you went to Chinatown. You were living in Chinatown, and how did that affect your life? Not as an early age, but also as an adult.
On my father's side, all of my relatives were very loving to me, and because I was of their blood, I had a bit more challenge with the general Chinese public, because as we all know, every ethnic group always tried to preserve purity to a large degree. But I traveled with my uncle, my dad, first of all, as a young boy on the weekends, that because he was not allowed, after he married my mother, he was not allowed to live on the reserve with my mother. So he had an apartment at the Mayo Hotel when I was a little boy, and I used to go there on the weekends, and he used to work at the Jim Koo Wholesale, and my playmate down there at that time was his youngest daughter, Yvonne Koo. You know, so we played in the alleyways and ate vegetables and fruit and fresh off the fire chashu, etc. So, and my uncle, then my dad passed away. Then my granduncle, he took over and became like a surrogate father to me on the Chinese side, and used to go to the gambling dens with him, and he says, you know, and I was accepted there, not a problem. So couldn't understand the Chinese that were being spoken, but as a young person, you know when there's racism or discrimination, and there was no vibes or feeling of that for me, because older people were very, they're not like today's and the post-1940 era of people that have a lot of deep-rooted discrimination in their bones, I guess. So, but yeah, it was an easy transition for me to go back and forth.
Mm-hmm. And the Chinese community at that time, how do they see you, a child of mixed ancestry from Musqueam to Chinese?
I couldn't really tell you, simply because as a child, you see everybody as being pure and honest and real. You know, traveling with my father, everybody in Chinatown knew my father of that age, that era. we would walk into a Chinese restaurant. He would go, because he delivered wholesale vegetables and whatnot to every one of them, he would go into the back and order his food there. So as I grew up and my father passed away, I thought it was normal. I would go back into the kitchen, and my wife of the day said, what are you doing? You don't do those things. I said, well, no, I did that all my whole life. So I had fun. It was nice. It was nice for me to be with adults, and they treated me like some just normal, I guess.
The part in the film where you talk about being forced to leave the reserve because you're non-Indian, because your mom married a Chinese. I mean, it just was such a racist colonial law to get you off of the reserve, but it also saved you from the residential schools.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? How do you feel?
Well, today, first and foremost, I could have gone to residential school, but I wasn't forced to, because under the law, under the Indian Act, Indian children had to go, and I could have gone with them, but the priest in our community told my mother, "Don't let your son go," and because I was a fairly good athlete at that young age, and the brother and the priest wanted me to go and go up there, but thank God I didn't. And growing up in my community, being an only child, that it became challenging because your playmates and your cousins aren't there. So there was good and bad to it for me. So the older people became my playmates, and I don't know how it was in the Chinese community or Japanese community, but the elders of that era, the old people, they didn't talk down to me. They came down to my level and became my playmates. And in the evenings and whatnot, I became the surrogate son, grandson, and nephew of all of the people in my village. So I got to hear their stories. And when my cousins came home and we started to grow up, there was a bit of resentment over time, because, as an example, when a cultural occurrence was to happen, they wouldn't go to their immediate children. They would say, "We're going to go to your cousin Howard," and then, and I think there was a slight. First of all, it was okay, but then after a while, you could see a sense of not real resentment, but to say, "What the hell? Why are they going to my cousin? I can do it," kind of thing. But they were so used to me being the one, because I was the only one at that time. So I call it a blessing, because now I become the semi-historian of my community, but as well too, that I lost all of my playmates, in a sense of the older people, they're all gone. And I had to preside over every one of their funerals as a spokesperson, as a longhouse speaker. And it became harder and harder and harder as each one started to leave. So there's good and bad to it, in the sense of emotions.
Mina, can I jump in?
Yes, of course.
I want to ask Wade, how did you feel going to your grandfather's village in China?
Well, I felt honored because I was the only one of my father's children that that went. My sister has since taken the trip there, but for me, it was it was finally having that connection physically to who my grandfather was. I always had that emotional and spiritual connection with him, because I was lucky enough to have a father and uncles who, although they lost their father at a young age, understood the importance of passing on and instilling who Grandpa Gordon was, a man that struggled so mightily to try to provide for his family, not only here, but across the water in southern China. You know, I always took pride in who I was as a quarter Chinese and half Musqueam. It wasn't something that I ever felt shame about because I thought it made me a stronger person. And I've never told my father this, but I almost feel resentment because he changed his last name from Hong 3 months before I was born. So I was never Wade Hong. But you know, I always felt a pride to always tell people that my family's family name wasn't originally Grant, it was Hong. So to be able to go back to the homeland of the Hong family, to walk the streets that my grandfather walked probably the days before he moved here, just was an overwhelming feeling. And to know that you know, our family was welcoming us there, and we're so excited. If you see the part in the video where we broke bread with them, they were very excited to meet us, to see that they have family, not just within the borders of their town, but across international boundaries. And the moment that actually still sits with me today, and I tell everybody, that's probably one of the most emotional moments I've ever felt, was when my auntie, who I'd never met before, pulled me into the room, into the living room of the home. She opened up her cabinet and started taking out picture books with photographs, and showed me photographs of family. But then she started going deeper and deeper into them, and she started showing me photographs of my own children, who were 3 and 5 at the time. So for me, it made me realize how strong a connection we had, because I don't know who these people are, never met them in my life, but our family felt it was so important to continually let them know that they have that connection to the Hong family in Vancouver, to keep sending photographs of their family as it grew from the 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and the 2000s. So to see my son Eli and my daughter Isla in somebody's cabinet in a small village in southern China made me realize why it was important for my family to ensure that I knew who I was as a member of the Hong family, to make sure that my children, who are only 1/8, but they are Chinese Canadians. They are, and I tell them that every day. And going there and sitting there with my family and looking through those photographs only further strengthened my resolve to continue on my grandfather's legacy, to make sure that our children and their children know where they come from. So that moment there really drove it home for me.
I'm going to ask a question. I think I remember at the film at one point, your relatives in China were showing you the clan book that recorded back, 17 generations?
Yeah.
How did that come about? Because I know how precious that book is. Usually a lot of family, like my family, lost it during the Cultural Revolution. It was all burned. And how did you feel to see that lineage that going so far back, and seeing your father's name being in it? Are your names in there as well?
Yes, and it was deeply emotional, you know, and I was quite surprised that we were sitting there and we were chatting, and as best, and I have to thank the Chinese Consulate General at this time, and Lu Fei, who helped me get 3 translators to be with us. One was not enough. I mean, one would have been all right, and I had an Uncle Edmund, travel with us, who spoke village dialect, but not fully. So we had 3 translators with us, and that really made it very comfortable. And then all of a sudden this book comes out, and the lead translators was shocked to say they want to show you something. And then they started to go through the book and talked about the family, you know, and it showed where my father was, and then the children, his children. So we were the 17th generation to go in there, you know, and it, on my mother's side, it's an oral history that I have to cite and recite, and my children, when they get names, they have to be able to cite and recite as to how they are entitled or privileged to take that name when the extended family gives them that honor. So it's similarly a challenge, but it's there. And thank God the Chinese have the written language to do that, but we didn't, and we still don't today. Well, we do now. But yeah, it was touchy.
Go ahead.
So it was emotional, and even now, it's still. I thought I would be fine talking and whatnot, but it still brings up tears and emotion. So I apologize if I start.
Oh, please don't. I know how you feel. Yeah. I want to ask both you and Wade that both of you are very active in the Musqueam band. What do you see are the challenges in interacting with outside world, and in particular with newcomers or Chinese newcomers, if there's any interaction with that community?
Well, I don't see it as a challenge. I see it as an opportunity to to reconnect with a community that was very connected to who we are for over half a century, or almost a century. Because if without the Chinese community, without my grandmother's generation welcoming the Chinese community, I wouldn't be here today. I think it's an important part of Canadian history that sort of gets brushed under the rug, that isn't taught in schools, isn't shared in podcasts and whatnot, that needs to be shared. Because I think a lot of people, when I tell them about the Chinese history in Musqueam, it's almost like a light bulb goes off in their heads, and it takes a sense of pride that the first peoples had probably a stronger relationship with newcomers to Canada for many, many decades than even what we consider traditional Canadians. I think it's an important part that we have to share. And the challenge right now isn't so much wanting to share it, it's having people I always get, is it appropriate for us to come down there? Is it appropriate for us to ask questions? That's come because for so long, our reserve was considered, out of sight, out of mind. We're down below Musqueam Park along the Fraser River. Many years it was a no-go zone for people, and so people are very hesitant to be able to ask questions that really are needed to be asked about who we are, about our struggles, and about our ambitions to share who we are as Musqueam people, to share our history as Chinese Canadians, to share that because it is Canadian history. It's a part of our history that's another piece of fabric that intertwines us as a country, because we only learn so much in high school. We only learn so much in university. The real history is with people like my father, with people like my Uncle Larry, with those people that have lived those lives, that have lived the changes over the years. So one of the biggest challenges is to let people know that it's okay to come down here now. It's okay to ask those questions. It's okay to reach out to Wade and Howard. And I try as much as I possibly can to engage in as many community groups, as many forums such as this, to let that story be told. So there is an opportunity there. I think more and more people are starting to notice that, and I'm trying to be a part of a generation that shares that. So for me, I'm enjoying it. It's a big part of my life, and I enjoy doing it every day.
Howard?
Yeah, I want to step back and just say, because Wade brought up a point, about how my two older children got to use the name Hong. My oldest son, Trent, as he entered school, his name was Trent Hong. And my oldest daughter, Larissa, was Larissa Hong, until my mother gained what was rightfully taken away from her. And the courts said that the marriage was null and void because my father was already a married man. And my mother lost a lot of property and money. And our women of our community were our historians and our genealogists, and as every culture, the men go out and do their thing, but women had the responsibility of educating and maintaining. So when it came time for us to regain our position, it was a decision that had to be made because we didn't know what our name, or people didn't know. Like my birth certificate was Jang. I went by Hong. Now the marriage was null and void. So we made a decision to take our mother's maiden name, Grant. So that's how, there was no ill feelings or disrespect of not wanting to be a Hong, but it's unfortunate. There's a lot of anti-racism at this moment, and I've just found out that Vancouver is the worst place for anti-racist for Chinese in North America or the world, and it's sad. It saddens me greatly, you know, because I know the first wave of Chinese people to come to Canada and British Columbia. BC was built on the backs of those Chinese people, not only on the railroads, but the laundry places, the restaurants, and they were also the ones that helped the Indigenous people survive in an new economic world that they had to come to because things were taken away from them, their land, their resources. And then all of a sudden you have the Chinese entrepreneurs. The only people they could hire were Indians. And then that's why there's a lot of Chinese Indian children and they're now coming to the fore to be recognized. But the sad thing is that we all still today aspire to be white. You know, the Chinese people have been very blessed and fortunate that they have a multitude of billionaires that have built and have, I don't want to use it, I'll use the word, bought their way into that white Anglo-Saxon Protestant club kind of thing. You know, they've donated large sums of money and whatnot, but none has gone towards the history and the insistence of a curriculum into the schools to recognize this legacy. You know, I sat on an advisory body that we went to the government for a mere pittance of sums of money for the heritage legacy, you know, and we fought long and hard on both fronts, Chinese and Japanese and Indigenous, and the governments gave us an apology. You know, sorry just doesn't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because today you see that racism and you know, and so and my father, and Richard Lee's on here right now too, and his family and others, we had a large, significant number of farms in our community. We embraced the Chinese population of men that came to this country. And we welcomed them with open arms. And they treated us equally as well too. And we entered into what you call bakshi leases. Like they said, can we farm 10 acres or 3 acres or 4 acres of this land? Because that's what southern China, where they came from, had good fertile soil. And that was fine. Then all of a sudden, the city of Vancouver, under the challenge, and they sent notices to one Chinese farmer called Chao Chi. And there's a famous court case called the Chao Chi versus Regina. And that's the farmers had to then start paying property tax and whatnot to the city of Vancouver, who had nothing to do with our village because we were under the jurisdiction of the federal government, not the city of Vancouver or the province. So a lot of the farms had to leave because they couldn't afford to pay those kinds of tax. And yet those farms fed the city of Vancouver during the Depression era and whatnot, and our people too, you know? So I look at that and then you ask me the question, what do I think about the new wave of Chinese? I welcome them, but at the same time, I look at them and say, you need to pay homage to the first and second wave that came here. They're the ones that set the foundation so that you and your future generations could hopefully enjoy life. And that's why I'm still saddened now because of this anti-racism BS that's currently happening, or this racism, not anti-racism. So I know it's a long story, but I too, like Wade, I'm still an optimist and look to, and I'm proud of who I am, Native and Chinese.
Thank you so much, Howard and Wade. I feel for you. I'm a first generation Canadian, immigrated from China, lived in Hong Kong, and I'm working with newcomers. And now I got your words and Wade's words, and I'll be in touch with you and bringing more newcomers to visit you and to understand more of the history. As Howard said, that the first and second generation of pioneers. I just want to bring it quickly of a little bit of history. Actually, the first Chinese that came to West Coast shores was in 1788. There are 50 artisans that came with Captain John Mears to build a trading post of sea otter pelt between Guangzhou and China, and also Nootka Sound, British Columbia. So it's 1788, and that's how far it goes back. Part of the pelt, animal beaver, sea otter pelt. Yeah, so lots of history there, and lots of work to be done to educate and to gain knowledge, to exchange and build the connections. And it's very emotional for me too. Then next session would be questions for Sarah, the producer of this film, the three films, the I think lead producer of All Our Father's Relations, and she went with the Grand family to China, and also the co-producers of the other two short films. Sarah, where are you? I don't see her.
I'm not sure where I am on your screen, but I'm here.
Okay, good. As a producer of this film, All Our Fathers, and then the co-producers of the two short films, how did the idea of making these films about the Grand family come about? And also let's talk about the two short film first, because I think they were made earlier. It was 2002, was it?
It was 2010, I believe. In 2002, I was still in Prince Rupert.
Yeah, so how did you choose to make that? I know it's a part of Canadian Chinese stories. How did that come about, the project, and then also moving to eventually to All Our Father's Relations?
That's a great question, and the projects are interrelated in the sense that at that time, I was just beginning my master's degree at UBC because I wanted to continue learning about not only the relationship between our university and Musqueam, which has been evolving, but the history of Chinese Canadians and First Nations in the province as I grew up in Prince Rupert. So I decided to do further studies at that time. And I had begun a project on campus to help educate students living on residence about the origins of the names that UBC had named in the 1960s at a site called Totem Park Residence. And that led to an opportunity to work with Howard's brother, Larry, on a project to name student houses in the Hunkaminam language. And this was the first time our university embarked on that naming process at an official level. So it was quite a large initiative, but it was during that period where I got to work quite closely with Larry on educational initiatives. And at that time, my graduate co-supervisor, Professor Henry Yu, was leading the Chinese Canadian Stories Initiative, which was federally funded and involved several communities across Canada to celebrate the stories of Chinese Canadians. And they had sat down with Larry and recorded hours and hours of footage about his personal story. And because I had already been working with Larry, they gave me the challenge of learning how to edit films for the first time and try and create a few shorts that would resonate with the public. And so I got to learn how to edit films from Alejandro Yoshizawa, who then became director of All Our Fathers Relations. And Al was the lead videographer for that project. So in that sense, that's how the opportunities came together. But around the same time, I had watched the film Cedar and Bamboo, which is a short film that featured Howard and 3 other individuals who are mixed Chinese and First Nations. And I feel like that documentary really opened a dialogue in the province about intermarriage between the 2 communities. And in terms of being an emerging storyteller, that film inspired me to help come up with the idea to accompany the Grant family on their trip to China. And I must say, we're very grateful that Howard, Wade, your family trusted us to accompany you on that journey. I feel like you've always treated us as an extended member of your family. And it was such an honor to go on that trip. Al and I raised the idea at that time as we knew it was such a rare opportunity, and we didn't know if another trip would be made like that again. And even since that trip, their uncle who they met in that journey has since passed away. So I feel like that is another reminder of how important it was to document that trip, not only to educate the public, which the family had a desire to do, but to have that record for future generations, such as Wade's children, to learn about their relatives across the water. So those are a few of the projects that led to the development of All Our Fathers Relations.
And you already answered some. I was going to ask you what was it like going to China, a country so different from Canada. Was it your first time? And also visit a family that you and Howard and Wade have never met before, if I understand from the film. Mm-hmm. And they're basically strangers. Howard mentioned about how to seeing them and then connecting and with them of the emotional connection with the relatives, even for the first time. Was there any previous communications with the relatives featured in the film, like before you went there? Or was it through the consulate, the Chinese consulate, or how did you connect with those members?
As you'll see in the documentary, Howard's uncle Edmund, who is living in Burnaby today, was really the person who I think kept that connection going for all of these years. He keeps in very close contact with his relatives and can speak in the village dialect, and had made several trips on his own to the village prior to taking the grants. So he was, I would say, the lead communicator. And in that sense, as a filmmaker making crew, we didn't have to make those arrangements. And when we got to the village, I feel like, as Wade and Howard described, they were so welcoming and generous, and we didn't find it uncomfortable at all. It was definitely a challenge to capture so many events unfolding at once, and there were only 2 of us recording. But it was great to have that translation team, as Howard mentioned, because I too speak very little Cantonese, and Al himself is Japanese. So in that sense, it was also a new experience. It was my second trip to China, but my first time being so close to where my mother's from, because my family is from Toisan, which is right next to Zhongshan, where the Grants are from. So for me, it was also a way to reconnect with my heritage. And when we landed in Hong Kong, I got to meet some of my father's siblings for the first time.
Oh, wow. So it's also personal to you.
Yes, it was.
And I'm going to ask the last question. Are there any challenges making this film? What are the challenges of making this film, editing or finance or anything like that in the production? Because you are talking about 2 countries across the Pacific.
Mm-hmm. I would say it's never simple to make a documentary, but I see them more as opportunities and challenges. I think we were very fortunate in many different ways. For example, in terms of the resourcing it requires to make a film, you definitely do it out of passion rather than for any monetary or other gain. It's really a work of passion. But we were fortunate to have people like Howard and Henry serving as our executive producers in a way, in terms of finding the financial resourcing. There were contributions from the province of BC, for example, and from the Consulate General. So I think without that, it would have been even more challenging to get things going. But I think we were able to have the right people around us to take this film across the finish line. The other challenge is also, how do you distill so many stories, and it's such a rich history that this family carries, into a 1-hour movie. We have literally hours and days of footage that people haven't seen that are still on the hard drive. And so we were in the editing room for well over a year, I would say, finding the right narrative to shape the film around. Ultimately, we decided to focus on the relationship between Hong Tim Hing and Agnes, and then build it out from there. At first, we wanted to look at Chinese and First Nation stories all across the province, but of course that deserves another movie altogether. So I think in that sense, one of our greater challenges was finding a way to create a short film that would resonate with the public.
Yes, documentaries are always labors of love. And it's always the hardest part is the distillation down to the essence of the story you want to tell. So Mina, I think that we have a lot of people who want to ask questions, and
That's
Lynn
wonderful.
was going to keep track of the order of them because I can't see it on my chat. Lynn, are you around?
Yeah, I'm here, and I've got notes as well to help me. And we agreed that besides, you're welcome to put a question in the chat, or to raise your hand using the raise hand function. We've got 3 people there now. You can probably see them with their golden hands up, but it won't work to wave a hand. That won't work. So two ways of asking a question. And Michael Scales has had his hand up for a while. He's our first questioner. And then after that, I'll go to Richard T. Lee in the chat. So Michael, you're on.
Yes, Howard has answered my question a little bit in the chat, but I wanted to say that I am of mixed ethnic origin, so I know this is a complicated question sometimes, but how would you self-identify, and I actually asked this question of both Howard and Wade, would you say I'm Chinese Canadian, Chinese Musqueam Canadian, Musqueam Chinese. Which would you say first, and which would be second, or which would be third? And why do you select the particular order that you might select of what you want to tell the world? Because I know that, at times people would tell you what you were, like you were Chinese and not Indian, or you're Indian and not Chinese. But what's really important is, how do you self-identify?
I will go before Wade because he's more tactful and diplomatic than I am. I identify myself first as a Musqueam person. And the reason why for that is simply because I am the spokesman for the Grant family, the Kayapalana family extended. And the name was bestowed upon me by the elders of my community that belong to that name, Kayapalana. I'm Kayapalana the seventh, and he was the man who met Captain Kayapalana, the warrior's son, was the man who met Captain Vancouver upon his arrival here. A number of other people try to carry that name because some people went to England using that name. But the person who carried that name to England was not a blood descendant of Kayapalana. Okay, so yet, because the name was so powerful within our native country. So, and because I have that responsibility that was bestowed upon me by my extended family, so I recognize myself first and foremost as a Musqueam person. And equally, I have no problem in saying I am also of Chinese descent. My Chinese name is Hong Man Heng. Very proud of that name. And as well too, that I use my English name. So I then say I'm a Canadian. But first and foremost, I'm a Musqueam person that is very proud of my Chinese heritage. And I agree with you. As a young boy growing up, my peers at that time who learned about discrimination at residential school and whatnot, started to say, you're Chinese, and what those kind of when people want to hurt you, and they know that you've already defeated them in other forms of debate, then they say nasty things that they sometimes don't mean. So I look at those kinds of things and say that it presents a challenge.
Thank you.
Thank you. How about you, Wade? How do you?
Yeah, I have a little different answer than my father. I have a different answer because I'm actually I have a few more grandparents that have different backgrounds as well. Because on my mother's side, my mother is a half Musqueam, half Norwegian Scot woman. So I am a quarter Caucasian, quarter Norwegian Scot, and a quarter Chinese, and half Musqueam. And I don't like to self-identify as really anything. I do I'm proud to be Musqueam. I live in Musqueam. I stand up for Indigenous rights and whatnot, but I would do a disservice to the struggle that my grandfather Gordon Hong did, that my grandfather Willard Sparrow went through, that my grandmother Agnes Grant went through, and my grandmother Helen Malcolm, who was the first Caucasian woman to live on our reserve. If I chose one over the other, I think I am equally proud and should be equally proud of each and every one of them for their blood that runs through me, because if without them, I wouldn't be here, and a lot of people wouldn't be here, because it's people like them that persevered through so much to ensure that the Indigenous people of Canada, the Chinese people of Canada, and those that risked marrying people outside of their race when it wasn't viewed upon positively. They did so much that I can't really self-identify as anything. I'm proud to be each and every one of them. I take every opportunity to tell everybody who I am, and that is the quintessential Canadian today, because I have so many different backgrounds running through my blood, and even more so my own children, who I tell to be even more proud because they're even more mixed than I am. They're Cree, Chinese, Musqueam, Scottish, Norwegian, and they've got so much running through their blood, and I make sure that they're proud of each and every descendant that they come from, because I always introduce myself as the son of Howard and Wendy, and they are the children of my grandparents, and I wouldn't be anything without them.
Oh, thank you, Wade. Thank you. There's a question from Richard Lee in the chat, and it is to Howard and or Wade. How is the Chinese Market Garden as heritage site project going? Can you tell us about that?
I can speak to a little bit. We still have a very strong connection to that market garden. Actually, the last two houses that you saw in the movie when my father went walking through with the flashlight, those still stand in that area. They are still a part of our community. They're still the sort of the cornerstone that I always bring people to when I give tours, the walking tours of Musqueam, to share and show the history of the interracial marriages that happened in Musqueam. I want to ensure that those are stay intact as long as possible. If we can restore them, that would be something I would want to do. Because of everything else, like everybody else knows, things have been put aside. But because of the last year, because of other priorities, especially in our small community where COVID is a very real thing, like everybody else, we have put a lot of our resources to ensuring that that COVID is not coming into our community. We've done a good job so far. We haven't had any deaths. We've had a few people that have got it, but that's still really one of the main things that's taking our time. But we haven't forgotten about the ability for us to really honor that site.
Okay, thank you. We've got two hands up and then another question in the chat. And the next question is from Anne. Anne, would you like to unmute?
I would like to say that I watched these films very carefully. And
oh, Anne, we can't hear you. I can't hear your voice. Can you be closer or speak more loudly?
I think it's my microphone. Can you hear me now?
Just barely.
So let's pass to Cynthia and I'll see if I can adjust my mic.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. Yeah, Cynthia, you have the next question then.
I'm just wondering whether Howard or Wade have seen this new published children's book. This is called.
Well, I haven't seen it. I don't know if Wade has. I think
Yeah.
Wade.
I did. Yes, Esther. We met Esther 2 weeks ago at an anti-racism rally in downtown Vancouver. She invited my father and myself to speak at that rally, and she was nice enough to gift one of those books to myself to pass on to my daughter, who is 10 years old, who had probably been around the same age as Esther was when she moved to Canada. So my daughter has that in her library now, and she actually read it to me the other night. So Esther's journey came over to Canada, and she really resonated towards some First Nations women and others that helped her as she moved forward. She experienced a lot of racism when she was younger, and really lifted up those First Nations people that had influenced her. So it was a book that my daughter now has sitting on her shelf. Unfortunately, my daughter is not here. She's with her mother tonight. Otherwise, I would tell her to come down here and she could show it to everybody, but she's not.
Yeah, this is so wonderful.
Gee, we're having tech problems here, hey? Yeah, Cynthia, the voice is breaking up. But thank you for that. Thank you. And shall we go back to Anne and see if Anne's microphone is working? Are you still there, Anne?
Not working? Try the next person.
Hello? I can't quite hear you. Do you want to try shouting, or do you want to try
You could try writing it in the chat.
Yeah, what could you type it into the chat, Anne, and then we can read it out for you.
You cannot hear me when I'm shouting?
Just barely, just barely. I think if you don't mind, I think it would be easier for us all if you type it into the chat. Are you able to do that?
Not really. I'll just pass. It's all right. I will pass to the next person.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thanks. We've got a question in the chat, and it's from Nan. And it's really asking for a bit more of an in-depth response, I think, on the issue of the welcome, for people to come down there, to the Musqueam area. Because what she's saying, she's wondering if there really is that welcome, because we see lots of good-hearted people flooding down there to try and make connections and learn. And she's concerned that it's a bit of an insensitivity. And that perhaps there would be more of a sense of responding to invitation rather than just going down. Like, how would people make connections in a good way?
Wade, you want to go first, or you want me?
I can go first. Nan, yes, I understand that. As I was growing up, there were no trespassing signs in Musqueam. There was, it wasn't really, it didn't look like it was extending a welcome, because there were a lot of people, and there still are a lot of people that are hesitant of outsiders coming down because of the treatment of Indigenous people for many, many generations, whether it be individuals or the police or fisheries. The no trespassing signs were actually put up because the Department of Fisheries and Oceans used to come and raid our fishermen many, many times back when I still remember when in the 70s and 80s. They would come down and just raid the fishermen, take their fish, their boat, their gear, and take off. So Musqueam had to put those no trespassing signs up to let them know that this is our private property. So those were why the no trespassing signs came up. But my generation, and others in previous generations are wanting to extend that welcome, extend that invitation to come down. I do understand there are people probably in our community that still will, be hesitant or ask why you're coming down. I always tell people to reach out to me, and I make time for anybody that wants to come down here, and I will greet them myself. And you can contact me at my email address, wadegrant@gmail.com. I will be there. I've done it many, many times with individual people, because I think it's important for people to come down here and take a walk and go down to the river, go down and see the Longhouse and talk with somebody that's from here. It's an important thing for me, because it's, as a father of young children, I want to introduce people to our culture. I want our culture to be shared with other people, because we need to take our rightful place in our own territory. And for me, that starts with us sharing who we are in our community. When you come down here and smell the Longhouse, those types of things. One of my proudest moments, and I've ever been a part of, was co-organizing the very first Canadian citizenship ceremony on a reserve in British Columbia in 2013. We had a citizenship ceremony in our cultural center where we welcomed 40 new Canadians took their oath of citizenship in Musqueam. So for me, that really showed where I want our community to go. The first people welcoming the newest Canadians, like it was when my ancestors met the first explorers here. So for me, I want to be a person that welcomes people. And like I said, my email address is wadegrant@gmail.com. Do not hesitate to email me, and I will make time for anybody that wants to come down here, because I know it's an important thing to do.
Wow, that's what an offer. That is an incredible offer, Wade. Thank you. It looks like Anne's got her mic back. Sorry, do you want to give it another try? Oh, I'm sorry, Howard. Did you have something to add to that?
Just before we get to Anne, just at this very moment, we're not really accepting visitors in our community. And the reason, like right now, at all of our entrances, we have road stations, and that people who are coming into our community, they're asking those individuals, what business are you wanting to do? Like, do you have family or what? And the reason why for that is because of the pandemic. You know, so I wanted to share that with you because you might say, well, gee, I went down there and it was we couldn't get in. But if as Wade pointed out, if you text him and then said, yeah, come down tomorrow, then whoever is coming down at the road station would be saying, I'm going to meet with Wade Grant and to do a tour kind of thing. So
Okay, thanks for that. Thanks for qualifying that. And I've jotted it down. I'm planning to send Wade an email soon and find a convenient time, whatever works.
yeah.
Thank you. Anne, yes.
Can you hear me now?
That's a bit better. You still have to speak up, but that is better.
I can actually bump up the mic even more.
Okay, that's perfect.
Yep.
What's your question?
I'd like to make some comments, really.
Okay.
I'm very happy that we had such a good turnout for this event because I feel I kind of pushed for it. I knew about the Grant family history and I saw a chance to really understand it more. And I love the story about the 3 pink houses on the Musqueam Reserve. And I think there's a wonderful opportunity there, Sarah, for some storytelling. And I cried when I watched these 3 documentaries that were posted on the UCB website. It was, one of the really interesting people, he's like a supporting cast member, is Edmund Leong, who is the granduncle of the Grant siblings. And I thought it was really neat because even though he's younger than, say, Howard, it's like he was the big brother, kind of like pulling you along and saying, let's go back to China. Let's go visit our ancestors' village. And so the trip really was, I tend to interpret things. And I felt like it was a way for the Grant family to really heal and to just recover a lot of dignity that should never have been taken away in the first place. And so there were these injuries caused by the Chinese Exclusion Act and the Indian Act, which harmed both your parents and your family. And somehow this trip back to China was this wonderful opportunity to reconnect and heal. And it was, well, I apologize if I'm interpreting too much, but it's a beautiful story.
Okay, thank you, Anne. Thank you so much for that.
One day.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. At this point, there aren't other hands up. There aren't other questions in the chat. We still have a bit of time. I'd kind of like to turn back to Howard and Wade and see, would you have more comments you'd like to make? Anything else you'd like to share based on, you know, what's come up during the discussion?
One interesting point that I'd like to raise after the fact that, well, first and foremost, I've never, well, I've thanked Sarah and Alejandro, but I've never formally thanked them, you know, to say, you know, thank you very, very much, because, you know, growing up under my mother's tutelage and the Chinese tradition as well, humility is the first thing you're taught, you know. And when she asked about can we follow you on the trip and do a documentary, and my teachings of that of still today is that who wants to hear about my story? It's, you know, it's me and it's personal and whatever. And yet it's won a number of awards across North America and Asia. And I'm still amazed by how many other ethnic groups it has touched, you know, that have lost and have suffered somewhat very similar circumstances. I mean, right now, the Middle East, that people are fleeing their country and their families, and they can't get back there, those kinds of things. But what I wanted to say was, following that, I've gone to China a number of times now on different kinds of excursions. And I learned that the Chinese government, and a few years ago, I don't know, I'll say within the last 10 years, provided multi-million dollars to a group to come to Canada, North America, and to other areas, because they knew that the wave of the Chinese people leaving China in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And so they wanted to hear stories about it. But whoever these interviewers were, they talked to the wrong people. You know, they didn't talk to the people who knew who to redirect them to, like Dr. Henry Yu would have been a good source to say you should come to these 9 different whatnot. So, and I was saddened because China now does not have the full early understanding of the struggles and whatnot of the Chinese people of that era. So, and then as well too, when Sarah talked about getting some minimal funding, we were saddened that we couldn't get Canadian heritage funding. And the BC government wasn't going to give any money. It was the Consulate General Liu Fei who embarrassed them to match the money that Consulate General Liu Fei provided, as well as a private donor. So they reluctantly came in after the fact. So, and they have a lot to, you know, provincially and federally, they need to be more participatory.
Yeah, I'm noticing that, I don't know if you can also see the chat, Howard and Wade. There's many notes of thanks in terms of how helpful this has been for people understanding in a whole different way some of the local history here. And I noticed there's a comment here, Richard T. Lee. I don't know if you wanted to say anything. I noticed you've said that your grandfather worked on the farm, right, neighboring the Grants family, and perhaps you know them. Did you want to say something about your?
Okay, I would like just to thank you for the invitation to speak.
Yeah.
Thank you, Wade and Howard, for telling the story. I think it's very powerful. My grandfather came to Canada in 1913, and a few years later, he farmed in the Musqueam land. I believe is neighboring to Ling farm, which is called Hong Kong Garden, with his partner, farming partner, Mr. Lau. So yeah. I believe Howard and Larry actually know my grandfather when he was farming there, right? So until the 1960s, the time he retired, and I haven't seen my grandfather before 1971 when I immigrated from Hong Kong to Canada. So over the years, my grandfather went back to China to get married and have children. My father was born in China, and myself was born in China. So because of the Chinese Exclusion Act, since 1923, say until 1947, and so the family member could not come to Canada. And after the war, of course, due to economic and other reasons, my grandfather did only once went back to China. So this is how I miss my grandfather. But I think I want to go back to the market garden. At that time, there are many market gardeners, Chinese descent, or origin, working there, working together with the Aboriginal community, the Musqueam. I think my family, depending on those earnings of my grandfather to support the family in China. So I think the community, the Chinese community at that time owed a lot to the Musqueam people regarding the collaborations and the friendships in the Musqueam land. So I would like to thank the Grant's family, just a neighboring farm to Hong Kong Garden. I think that's speak volume regarding our long history of connection between the Aboriginal people and my family.
Actually, Richard, if you look at the
Mina for doing this.
That's beautiful. I'll pass it back to you, Mina.
Actually, Richard, if you look at the map under the film, there's a introduction and the film, and there's a map attached to it with hand drawn. And I think I saw Hong Kong Garden, like a Hong Kong garden. Yes, right next to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if Howard has any memory of my grandfather.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I used to go to the pink houses that were originally where they were located to my aunt's house. And so I had to pass alongside Linon, and then I had to pass through Hong Kong Farms. So, and then they had a dog that they had chained, a guard dog, and we call it Go Jay. Go Jay, yeah. That's what they call the dog. I don't know what it means in Chinese, but
stop. Gao Zai.
Yeah. So I remember that dog very well.
Okay.
And very, again, as I said, I was the healthiest kid in all of Vancouver because I carried a salt shaker in my back pocket. And as I played all day and whatever, I would dig up a carrot, wash it, or a tomato or cucumber or celery, And on my native side, we had orchards that had fruit trees and berry, so yeah, life was wonderful.
Okay. Thank you for the good memory. Yeah, that's all I want to say. Thank you, Amina, for organizing this.
Well, I have a team here, so it's everybody putting in. Like we had very short time at the BIPOC people, at the Unitarian, and for the Asian Heritage Month celebration, it was like 2 weeks. That's all we had, and I'm just so glad that we are able to get this fabulous panelists that are willing to make time and join us and share with us such moving, emotional, personal stories with us. And again, I thank you all for being here, and I thank the panelists, and I look forward to working with you and bringing more people to understand the stories and holding more events like that, like this. Maybe not, maybe with the newcomers, with Chinese-speaking newcomers. Maybe Richard Lee can help working with us together, and then bring this story to more people. Yes, so thank you all. I don't know if the other people have any questions. I'm going to ask again. If not, we're going to just wrap it up. And then again, I want to remind everybody that next Friday, it's going to be
next week is Rutsu.
That's right. Yes.
So if you have kids, teenagers especially, you might want to watch the movie. It's very short. And then Google Tamil Campos and see some of the other films he's made, because it's very sports oriented, extreme sports, and kids would really like that. And then in the process, learn a little bit about environmentalism and indigenous activism. Get that in.
Also, I think there's also a personal touch of a grandson bonding with the grandfather, David Suzuki.
Finally, yes, it was quite something. Yeah.
So spell Rutsu for me.
RUTSU. Can't remember if there's 2 U's or not.
Okay.
It's in the CBC docs. I can send you the link.
Okay, please.
Okay, so Tamiko, we are wrapping it up then.
Okay, thank you everybody for coming. It's just been a really amazing evening. Thank you to our guests. So we'll be in contact.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank you.
all.
Good night,
you.
everyone.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
you.
Lynn.
And thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
See you.
Hey,